The last few years have been quite harrowing in the film and television industry. Now, how have unions been impacted during this challenging period? Today's guest, Victoria Shen, is the executive director of the Writers Guild of Canada. Let's find out how the WGC has been tackling everything. Victoria, welcome to the spotlight.
Thank you so much, Bobby. I'm so glad to be here.
It's crazy. We've been friends for way too long. Like it's probably been like 30 years, but because we're Asian, let's say 3 years, because we look young. But we're not
I
really
am
that
young. What
young.
do you mean?
You
What
look
do you mean?
amazing. You're brilliant. I'm so happy to have you. You're doing such a good job with the Writers Guild of Canada. But okay, let's talk about the economy, right? So we really have to talk about the economy. The film TV industry has been pretty brutal for a few years. There's not really another way to say it. I do think Canada's on the upswing, but there's definitely been challenges. So let's start with the WG's perspective. Now, how is the WGC managing this period?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Things have been brutal. Like children, particularly children in animation, that sector of the business is almost like it's been decreasing at 50, 70%. It's just terrible.
Mm,
Even in the US, and I think we're not alone. Like in the US, the WGA issued a report and writing's job down in LA are down like 42% as well. So I think everybody's feeling the same thing. So I guess I've been sort of telling my own members and leadership that as the guild, we're resilient. So we're like a cactus in the desert. You know, we're
mm,
resilient. We are surviving, but I don't think anyone's really thriving in this situation right now. So
mhm.
yeah, definitely it's a hard time. And I think we need to during this time we just really need to stay like focused,
Right.
and united.
Well, look, it's interesting. I've known you for so long, and I know you to be both absolutely brilliant, but also extremely positive, right? Which I think, to be honest, I don't know if any union could have anyone better in charge right now. So my question is what do you see as the role of unions in this economic climate when everything is so uncertain?
Right. And I like that is really hard because as a guild, like we are a guild of freelancers, right? So I don't have the power to go out there and necessarily, it's not like there's a show and then I get to dispatch writers to it. I don't get to pick
Right.
and choose who they hire. But I think there are a few things that we can do, and one of them is enforcing our agreement. So making sure that when writers do get work, that they are getting paid all the things that they're supposed to get paid. If things are late, that we're chasing those payments. We're also trying to do like member programming. So to give them skills and opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have. So one of the things that we did with this was a series of like financial literacy workshops. So like how are you going to be managing your money
Mm,
when there is not a steady source of income? How do you save for retirement? And then also, for example, like what do you do when you suddenly get a windfall and you get a big job and suddenly you have a lot of money? So what are you
mhm.
supposed to be doing with that as well? And then we do a lot of government relations stuff. The domestic production sector in Canada is very highly reliant on government funding.
Mm.
So we try to do a lot of advocacy in that area on issues that we know are going to be important to Canadian screenwriters.
I will say, if I could choose between those two, I would choose. Oh my God, I have so much money. How do I spend it? It's so hard buying things. I'm just joking. Okay. Look, we only have a minute left. It's interesting the time, right? The time. I'm trying to keep things positive because it's this is a doom and gloom, segment, right? And it's very true, right? I have noticed that the Hollywood unions in particular, they've signed their agreements very quickly. I was in LA back in 2023. Obviously, those strikes went on a really, really long time. And it seems like this time around, they were all like, "Okay, just get it done, get it done." So, you run a union, right? So are unions actively kind of like you see the business is kind of hurting, sign a deal quickly? Like, what is that relationship?
I think like okay, so I think one of the major issues around uncertainty is actually like the US is sort of the epicenter of a lot of the uncertainty that's happening around the world right
Mm,
now.
right.
And I think in that kind of environment, what you really want to do is you want to keep your members working. Like that's your priority. So I think avoiding any kind of strike or labor disruptions, like you gotta just do your best to try to keep everybody working. So I think that's their focus. That's sort of been our focus as well. You know?
I You're so smart. You have such a simple way of answering very complex questions, and we need like 1,000 segments. We only have three more, but I'm very happy to have you. We've got Victoria Shen for three more segments on the spotlight. Welcome back to the spotlight. I'm here with Victoria Shen. Okay, so you were on my last show as well, open source. You were fantastic. We talked, I think, the whole thing I think was about AI, but this is like I think a year later, and AI has really, really evolved. And I'm actually I have no idea what the answer to this is, but I'm very curious about the WGC's take on AI. Are you worried about AI?
I was very worried about AI about 3 years ago before we
Yeah.
got any kind of agreement language, and everybody was talking about AI all the time, and the US guilds were on strike, and we didn't have any kind of protection. I'm feeling much better about it now because I actually feel
Yeah.
like we did a really, really solid job in terms of getting fantastic protections under our agreement.
Mhm.
I also sort of feel like um, everybody's sort of even though there's a lot of articles out there and everybody's talking about how great AI is, if you actually talk to a lot of the industry lawyers and particularly IP lawyers, they're all sort of saying the same thing, right? Like you cannot use AI as a uh, in any kind of creative context, right? Because you don't know that the stuff is it's going to be a copyright infringement, it's not
Mhm.
copyrightable. And so, maybe you could use it as an efficiency tool, but you cannot use it in a creative way. So I'm not so worried that it's going to be taking away our jobs as much. And
Mm.
I also just sort of feel like all the lawyers in the creative sector is like very focused on this issue and that they're not going to allow these AI companies to run roughshod over us and like
Mm.
take away our jobs and our creative rights.
Right. Well, and look, I mean, I'm not sure how many people know your history, but I mean, you are a lawyer, right? And so, like, you really do know this stuff. And to be honest, like, that's uncommon. It's uncommon for union leaders to actually have your legal background. Okay, so you really understand this stuff. Okay, so what is the WGC doing to guard against AI? Can we get into some of those protections a little bit? Just because there's people who don't know.
Yeah, okay. So one of the key things that we put in a bunch of language in our collective agreement. So just to run through though, first of all, if somebody is giving a writer material that's been generated by AI in any way, they have to actually disclose that it's AI generated material.
Mm.
There's no reduction of compensation or credit. Okay, even if you use some kind of AI generated stuff along the way, that is not going to impact a writer's credit or their compensation.
Mm.
Also, under our agreement, our writers actually warrant that their work is not generated in whole or in part by AI. So that was always part of the guarantee that the stuff that they're handing you is original work that they created themselves. And if anybody wants to use your work to train or scrape some sort of AI, there is a whole procedure that they have to follow under the contract. So, for example, they have to disclose that this is what they're trying to contract for. You have to sign for it. You have to clearly disclose what you want to use it for. So it's a opt-in as opposed to an opt-out process.
Okay, so I mean, obviously you're very thorough. So let me ask you a question then. What is a realistic view of how you see AI being used in the screenwriting business?
Okay, so first of all, like you actually under our agreement, you cannot use AI in terms of like in the actual writing. We
Oh, okay.
always had a warranty in it that any work that's done by our members, it's original. It doesn't infringe on copyright. So it's kind of like an extension of that because if you use like AI, like a chatbot, then it's not necessarily original and you can't warrant that it's your own. So it was always so that warranty, I think, very much protects our jobs. But I also think that is actually something very positive that our writers and our members are offering. Because imagine if you're like a producer and you pay somebody to write something and they actually, all they did was actually put it into some sort of chat bot, right? So
Right.
you're not actually getting value for your dollar. So, I think the real question is what is the role of AI going to be in the industry? And I think a lot of people think AI is going to help us reduce production costs and all that. And but maybe this is an unpopular and different perspective, but I actually think AI is going to be the competition, right? I
Mm.
actually think that AI technology is going to just help a lot of users make their own user generated content because already people are watching TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. They're watching their own content and they're not necessarily watching, television or whatever show. Like you might see yourself scrolling on your phone instead of watching the show. So I actually think that AI is we're going to be competing with AI for eyeballs rather than AI necessarily being a tool for us.
I think that's the best take I've ever heard on AI. No, I'm serious. It was like, oh my God, because you're so smart and now and you're running a writer's guild, and it's like that's exactly what's going to happen. Anyway, look,
Well,
I have 10
already
seconds.
there's like,
I gotta go to commercial. No, I'm telling like
okay.
that was a mic drop. It doesn't happen very often. It's Victoria Shen on the spotlight. Welcome back to the spotlight. I'm here with Victoria Shen. Okay, Victoria, let's be a little more positive. It's been doom and gloom. It's my fault, right? But it's like you're running a union. It's like people are, they're trying to get jobs. It's a really tough time. It's not really anybody's fault. I don't think it's just like a lot of things are happening at the same time. But at the same time, seems actually to be a pretty positive time in Canada. We've got heated rivalry. We've got North of North. These are Canadian shows getting international attention. Like, do you view Canadian television as, I don't know, having a moment?
I have to tell you, I saw your interview with the producer from Heated Rivalry on your
Mhm.
show. That was so great.
Oh, thank
And
you.
it's just really exciting to see Canadian shows having this much hype and this level of international success. And a show that's actually like Rivalry, which is like so Canadian. It's got hockey, it's got Saskatchewan, it's got people going to the cottage. I think the other piece that really excites me about it is that people also talk about heated rivalry in the context of Jacob Tierney. And like, oftentimes we talk about that there really isn't much a star system in Canada. So it's great to see the actors on the show getting international recognition, but also the showrunner, right? Because most of the time people know the names of actors and directors. Very rarely do they actually know the names of screenwriters. So for him to kind of break through at that level as well is also super exciting. But I also think, Canada has had a number of fantastic Canadian shows like Schitt's Creek did really, really well, Kim's Convenience. So I hope this is like a turning point for us in our industry and as a country, right? That when we make Canadian content, we don't have to make it sort of generic and we don't have to make it Americanized. Like we can really lean into, what Canada is about and the diversity and reflect characters and stories that truly reflect who we are as a country. And I think Canadian screenwriters have a lot to offer to the world.
Look, and you're starting to see like Canadian television is getting a lot of attention internationally, right? It's like you see like all these American stars are coming here to be in Canadian shows. You see American studios. To be honest, like I've had many, many like seasoned um, producers, writers, you name it, in Los Angeles, trying to get a job from me here on the spotlight. It's like it's true, right? So I guess my question is like, why do you think like international audiences are connecting with these shows? Like, what is it about Canada right now where people are really taking a look at what we're doing here and being like, oh, this seems interesting.
Well, I love like, okay, I don't know if you've seen a show like North of North, which is written by our members. Like that is set in the Arctic in Nunavut. And so there is this beautiful winter like landscape, the location, and the costumes are also visually striking. So I think it's always compelling and interesting for people to see something that's very new and different that they haven't seen before. But at
Mm,
the same time, the storylines are something that's very like familiar and universal with them. And I think there's something really cool about kind of like owning your difference and really leaning into it, but also tapping into really universal aspects of the human experience. And on a show like Heated Rivalry, like, sure, it's a queer romance and sure, it's hockey, but the idea that, you like somebody and you don't know if they like you back. And if they like you back, you're not sure if they like you as much as you like them. That is a universal kind of story. And
mm.
it's lovely to kind of just see men being vulnerable and being portrayed in that way. So I think there's lots of reasons to like those shows, but I think there's something about um, Canadian humor and I think we talk about like punching up in
Mm.
our humor, right? Trying to like find the good in people. That's really kind of nice to see. And I think at a time when the world is kind of a dark and unpredictable place, I think those kinds of values and outlook really resonate with people.
It, the diversity too could be a really interesting factor, because these are diverse creators. Like, do you think the success of these shows will create opportunities for other diverse creators?
I really hope so, and you'll see because a lot of like Heated Robbery and North of North, they've both won a lot of awards, and always on the stand, they often talk about opening the door for the people coming after them.
Mm.
And so I really hope that that people are willing to take not a risk, that like diverse creators are not niche, that they actually have international appeal, and that yeah, broadcasters are just have an interest and are invested in telling unique stories.
Look, there's definitely something that shifted. Heated Rivalry was a great show, but I just feel like that's an inflection point for the entire industry. We've got Victoria Shen for one more segment on the spotlight. Welcome back to the spotlight. I'm here with Victoria Shen, the Victoria Shen, the executive director of the Writers Guild. Okay, all right, we know the title. We just got a title. Okay, now the WGC, of which you're the executive director, which maybe you didn't know, but you are. You conducted a survey recently. It was super interesting. Tell us about it.
So we surveyed 1,000 Canadians to talk about their like portrayals that they've noticed of Canadians in Canada on television. So 64% of them said that, when you look at American television, Canadians in Canada are portrayed in a very cliched and caricature kind of way.
Hmm.
So some very like typical stereotypes of Canadians that you would have seen. Like the majority, like the most common one is that we all have a funny accent and we say things like eight and like
Hmm.
about, or that Canadians are portrayed as being like overly dull and apologetic, or that we're like hockey obsessed, or that we're like rural and we like live in the north, or that we're kind of like dull and like awkward or sort of like bumbling. And then, of course, there's also very cliche portrayals of Canada, of our country, right? That it's always winter up here, that there's like maple syrup everywhere, or there's Mounties on horses, that it's all just like trees and mountains and lakes.
Okay, well, I'm not shocked by that. It's because I do watch a lot of television. I see it. I actually remember I had a play staged in New York City, and they were like, they were talking like, oh, hey, who is it? Like I was like, what are you doing? Like nobody speaks like that. Okay, now in terms of this survey, were there any other like surprises?
Well, I think the key thing that really surprised me was that when we asked people like what was preventing them from watching more Canadian content, only 10% of the people said it was because they preferred US content. Most people actually, most Canadians want to watch Canadian content, but they just feel that there is either like not enough Canadian content, or some of them are saying that it's hard to find. And then some of them are just saying they actually just don't even know what's Canadian because it's not like marked necessarily. But overall, like 91.7% of Canadians really believe that having content that's written and created by Canadians is really important. This is especially important for Canadian children and youth. And then that 76.7% think that film and television written by Canadians in Canada is very important to Canadian culture.
I'll be honest, it is very surprising. It's like I guess, it shouldn't be, but I guess I've been here for so long, and the idea that people actually want to see themselves represented on screen as Canadians, yeah, it does surprise me, but it's in a good way. Okay, well, if I had to be like, okay, well, all right, Victoria, why should Canadians support Canadian content, right? As if that was a question on my teleprompter, which it is. What would you say?
Well, I think you will understand kind of in theory the importance of supporting our culture and the significance of like art and creative expression. But I think what our survey really drove home is the idea that um, Canadians in Canada, like we look like idiots on American television. And if you want us to look different and you want Canada and Canadians to be portrayed in a more positive way, you actually need to invest in Canadian content, right? And that not only is that important for us to be able to see ourselves reflected on the screen, but those caricatures and cliches of us are also being reflected in screens internationally on through American content. So I think so, and also the other part that, Canadian film and TV, we often think about that it's a kind of entertainment, but I think that is one of the most important ways that people interact and engage with culture, right? That's how we. And so it's more than just like entertainment. I think film and TV, it's a kind of artistic and political act. It's an act of political expression, and I think it's a really important part of how we express and assert our cultural sovereignty and how we assert that we are distinct and different from American culture.
Just like when you talk, I'm just so aware how much smarter you are than I am. But it's great. It's great. Victoria, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, Bobby. It's always a pleasure.
It's an interesting time for the Writers Guild of Canada. There's so many challenges with unions and with Canadian culture. But Victoria, I mean, she's definitely the leader that we need right now. We'll see you next time on the Spotlight.